All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's very good to see you all. My name is Susanne Oosterwijk. I'm with the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs. And warm welcome to everyone here in the room and for those of you who might be joining online for this press briefing with Ambassador Gustavo Slauvinen of Argentina, who is the president of the 10th Review Conference of the parties to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, a landmark international treaty that is often referred to as the cornerstone of the global nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. And today marks the opening of the 10th NPT Review Conference, bringing the treaty's state parties here at the UN in New York until the 26th of August to review the treaty's provisions. I'm very honored to give the floor to the president of the conference, Ambassador Slauvinen, who will make a few remarks to set out his expectations for the review conference and who will then be happy to take your questions. I would like to ask, should you have a question, to please state your name and your affiliation. Thank you very much, Ambassador Slauvinen. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and it's such a pleasure to be back in this podium and to be facing colleagues from the media that I haven't seen in ages, and I'm very pleased that the opening of the 10th NPT Review Conference started in a good footing. We went through all the procedures matters, the approval of the agenda, program of work of the different authorities, the chairs of the main committees, without any problems. We already started with the general debate. We heard the statements by a couple of prime ministers, deputy prime ministers, and some foreign ministers, including Secretary of State Blinken, foreign minister of Germany and Denmark, Argentina, and will continue in the afternoon. General debate, it will go through Thursday probably, and then we'll start with the works of the main committees where the actual negotiations will take place, and that will be probably starting on Friday. Second week, third week will be basically at the level of the main committees and subsidiary bodies, and then the end game, the actual end game of the conference where the actual negotiations and give and take will take place will be the fourth week. It will be back into plenary, and let's see what the results are. I know that the expectations are mixed. Obviously, the international security environment has changed dramatically since February this year, but even before the invasion of Ukraine, the challenges that the Review Conference faced were very complex and difficult. We have important issues that they are pre-existent to the war in Ukraine and probably will continue to be important after the war ends, and I hope that will end as soon as possible. So, added complexity, added difficulty, but the importance of the issues don't go away. On the contrary, I believe that the threat of use of nuclear weapons in the context of the war in Ukraine have waken us up all, in the sense that the nuclear weapons didn't go away, didn't fade away with the end of the Cold War. They are still there. They're still presenting a clear danger to all humanity. And I believe that the Review Conference and state parties should take this opportunity to discuss what better can be done, in particular by the nuclear weapon states, to reinvigorate the nuclear disarmament agenda, while obviously paying due attention to the non-proliferation concerns, in particular in the North and the Korean Peninsula. DPRK is obviously a matter of extremely complexity and seriousness, but also the Middle East and the establishment of nuclear weapons-free zones in the Middle East is going to be, again, an issue that delegations will be paying
a lot of attention. I can go through the list of probably the most important issues, but I think it will be better for me to listen to you and take a couple of questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Slaubinen. The floor is open.
Welcome. It's good to see you after all these years. Welcome on behalf of the UN Correspondent Association. My name is Evelyn Leopold, Globetrotter Media. And my question is, there is a shadow of Ukraine hanging over this conference. Is there any specific worry about the Ukrainian nuclear reactors that seem to have been attacked, or I don't know if they're still in danger?
Thank you, Evelyn.
I think the IAEA might have said something.
Yeah,
Your old haunting grounds.
Yes, thank you, Evelyn. So good to see you. And indeed, the war in Ukraine, it's affecting, I would say, the three pillars of the NPT. As I say before, the threat of use of nuclear weapons goes against pillar one, which is nuclear disarmament, and in particular the negative security assurances that I would say the great majority of non-nuclear weapon states are demanding from the nuclear weapon states. And it's exactly what Russia violated. Violated the 1995 memorandum, the Budapest memorandum, by which provided assurances to Ukraine for Ukraine to send back to the then Russia the nuclear weapons that they have inherited from the Soviet Union. But also the arms attacks by Russian forces to civilian Ukrainian nuclear reactors is also, it goes against just the issues of nuclear safety and security that directly are dealt by the IAEA, and my colleague and friend Rafael Grossi, the DG, is dealing with that. But in the context of the NPT is related to Pillar 3, which is about the peaceful applications of nuclear energy in a safe and secure manner. So I'm expecting delegations to raise that issue, Russians' actions against Ukrainian civilian nuclear facilities, as going against that spirit. But also when the IAEA safeguards inspectors were unable to verify, I think, one or two nuclear reactors in Ukraine because they were already under the control of Russia, that also is related to Pillar 2 of the NPT, which is about non-proliferation and the necessary safeguards that countries have to accept and implement under the control of the IAEA. So you can see that there are minimum three actions that Russia have directly or indirectly taken in Ukraine that have a direct link to the NPT, and I'm expecting delegations to raise those issues. And always I say that as much as we have to show concern for those actions and probably state that they're unacceptable, I believe that also state parties will serve a better purpose if they were to take some lessons learned, because I'm afraid that this is not the first time, it's not going to be the last time that these actions may happen against civilian nuclear facilities in the world. I hope not, but chances are that we may have similar situations down the road, and I will say that let's get some lessons learned and how the international community can face those challenges in the future.
Hi, Mr. President. This is Deji Xu with China Central Television. My question is concerning AUKUS. We know that in 2021 November, US, UK, and Australia signed an exchange of naval nuclear propulsion information agreement treaty, which allows US to export highly enriched uranium to Australia, which also sparked some concerns from especially regional countries. Do you think this move is against the Non-Proliferation Treaty? What should the international community do? And more importantly, do you think this also set a precedent that probably will will start the arm race, especially in Asia Pacific region? Thank you.
Thank you. The AUKUS agreement between the UK, US, and Australia has raised serious concerns by many countries, in particular from China, Russia, and others. Obviously, it is about cooperations on naval nuclear propulsion systems. It's not what I understand is not related to nuclear weapons themselves. It's a propulsion system. But in my bilaterals with China, China has arisen the issue that China sees these agreements as in violations of the spirit of the NPT. Other countries have different views. US, UK, and Australia think that it's not in violation of the spirit, and therefore they're working with the IAEA regarding safeguards on how to place on the safeguards that enrich uranium that have to be used for the propulsions. It's not up to me as a president of the review conference to decide whether it's in violations of the spirit, the letter, or not of the treaty. It's up to state parties. What I'm expecting this issue to be discussed is going to be a hot topic to be discussed, and obviously what or how the state parties will handle the situation will set the tone for future possible similar scenarios by other countries. It's a different concept, but there is one state party to the NPT which is already working on naval nuclear propulsions, and I'm saying that the discussion could serve. Yeah.
May I have a follow-up? Do you consider this a loophole? Because in the text of Non-Proliferation Treaty, there's mentioning about the explosive device, nuclear explosive device, and they also talk about civilian-used nuclear device. But there is nothing between these two. So if you're talking about the NPT itself, for the Article 1, Article 2, they talk about the nuclear explosive device, so you can argue that this is not belong to that criteria. But on Article 3, they talk about the other civilian peacefully used nuclear device should be monitored by IAEA. Do you consider this propulsion for military submarine a civilian used peaceful device? And do you think IAEA could monitor this process? Thank you.
Again, it is not up to me as president of the review conference to decide whether these constitute a loophole or not of the treaty. It's up to state parties to decide. At the end of the day, it's a legal interpretation, and legal interpretations are given by state parties themselves. Probably have to look into the negotiations leading to the adoption of the treaty itself back in 1967, or whether they have discussed about this issue or not, and then have their own mind on these issues. From the technical point of view, it's up to the IAEA to determine how that enriched uranium to be used for the propulsion system of the submarines could be under safeguards or exempted from safeguards. This is what I understand, that have to be exempted from the safeguards. So again, it's not up to me to just get into those technical details. I understand that the IAEA is already engaging with, or the other way around, I understand that the three countries, Australia, UK, US, are already engaging with the IAEA on the technical aspects of these agreements. But also, in my own bilaterals with Australia, UK, and US, they have insisted that this agreement is still in the process of the technical, political, legal assessments by the three countries, in the sense that it's not a done deal, that I think that they have taken up 12 to 18 months to decide whether it's feasible or not. And if it's feasible for them and they will go ahead, then of course, all the legal aspects, technical aspects, it will have to be taken into account.
Thank you for doing this. My name is Kakushi Fujiwara from the Asahi Shimbun Japanese newspaper. And so what would you define the success of this review conference? What makes this review conference successful, and what should be included in the final document? Thank you.
I think, like many words, success have many definitions, and probably will have as many definitions as state parties. But I wouldn't define success only by the metric of whether the review conference will manage or not to adopt by consensus one single document. There's no template for the outcome of the review conference. The treaty doesn't call for any documents for the review conferences. If you look into the history of the review conferences, you will see that a couple of review conferences did manage to get by consensus one single document, but most of them failed to do so. Some of them, they managed to get like a 2-3 separate documents, like in 1995. The 2015 didn't success in getting consensus for the review part of the document, but did master consensus for the forward-looking approach, and this is the so-called action plan of 2010. Sorry, if I say 2015, my mistake. 2015, it was no document. 2010 is the action plan. So you can see that there are different possible approaches. And we'll see. We'll see at the end of the conference whether we can master consensus on one single document. My intention as president of the conference is to push the state parties to do their best to try to negotiate one single document by consensus in which you will have everything. And both the review part, meaning the implementation of the treaty, how good or not state parties are implementing the treaty's obligations under each of the three periods, but also the forward-looking part saying that, okay, and from now on, what better can the state parties do? As what concrete actions can they implement in the next review cycle? So this is my intention. I believe that is a delegation's responsibility to work hard during these 4 weeks to try to reach that one single document by consensus. Now, if 2-3 days before the closing of the conference, we realize that it will be impossible to master consensus in that single document, then state parties may decide to split it into single documents on some issues that could master consensus or not, or one single political declaration. Is up to them. But what I will try to get at least is that even if we don't get any document out of this review conference, but if the delegations will leave New York with a sense of what needs to be implemented in the next 5 years, I think in itself, what I call a meaningful outcome, something that it will help state parties understand what is required for them to do better in the implementation of the treaties. I believe that in itself will be success or whatever you want to call it. So I think I will push for a meaningful review conference and a meaningful outcome, whichever the format of that outcomes may be.
Thank you so much for this briefing. From Qusayfi from Arab News Daily. I have a specific question on Iran, because this review conference is coming at a time when the JCPOA talks are reportedly on life support, not really progressing at all. And Iran reportedly is said to have enough fissile material for a nuclear device. So what are your specific concerns about Iran during this review, and what kind of threats do they pose for the NPT?
Thank you. The JCPOA, I think just it was concluded in 2015, right after the last review conference, so therefore was not discussed at that conference. Obviously, since then, many things have happened. The JCPOA, then the abolition of the JCPOA, or at least the U.S. Leaving the JCPOA, then restart of negotiations, and now the impasse where we are. At the end of the day, it's up to those state parties to make decisions on whether revitalized JCPOA will be
possible or not. The impacts on the review conference will be in two folds, in the sense that I believe that the U.S. and other state parties are going to raise the issue and their concerns regarding Iran's nuclear program, because they have their own views about that nuclear programs. And obviously they will bring some references to what the IAEA and DG Grossi have stated in his latest reports regarding some inconsistencies and some issues regarding past activities of Iran's nuclear programs that, cast a shadow on the program, or, just open questions about whether that program is truly for peaceful purpose or not. And obviously those delegations at the review conference are going to bring up that issue. I am expecting Iran to defend its programs, to present it as peaceful as they say it is. And then the question will be, how much the US and others will push for this issue to be included or not in any outcome documents. I believe that the more progress we may have in the talks in Vienna regarding JCPOA, probably the lesser the level of the discussions in the review conference, and on the reverse side, if there is no progress on those talks, probably will be more the debate here. But the second element that I would say will influence the talks or the lack of progress of talks regarding the JCPOA is regarding the 1995 resolution of the review conference on the establishment of a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. That coming from that zone, that is very important to all countries in the region, at least to most of them, and others, that the review conference take up on the issue and see how progress or lack of progress have been achieved, and then how to move forward that resolutions. I understand that the UN-sponsored conference on the establishment of a zone free of weapons of mass destruction, including nuclear weapons in the Middle East, that started in 2020 and then I think just in 2021, and it will continue later this year. It's been seen by many state parties as a new development, as a positive development towards the implementation of the 1995 resolution. So I believe that element is going also to play a role in the discussions when we touch upon Iran's nuclear programs. I think both things are linked and they're going to be discussed. How it's going to be handled, how it's going to be resolved, what is going to be the review conference saying on that, this is something I cannot predict, and we have to wait until probably last week.
Toshi Naba from Kyoto News. Thank you for the opportunity, President. Let me ask you on Hiroshima action plans proposed by Japanese Prime Minister Kishida. It seems, calling for the enhancement of transparency and the decrease the reduction of the global nuclear stockpile, but it seems overlapping with the past agreements, promises made at the NPT review conferences. How would you evaluate the action plan, this Hiroshima action plan, how substantial it is?
Thank you. I listened to Prime Minister Kishida's statement very closely, and I believe that he brought to the table very interesting proposals, including the Hiroshima plant. I wouldn't say that it overlaps. I would say it overlaps or maybe builds up upon the action plan, because I think just circumstances have changed, and positions by the parties have also evolved since the 2010 action plan. And we have to look into these very difficult issues with a fresh look, and I think this is what the Prime Minister was trying to do it. But also because many other state parties, like those members to the Stockholm Initiative or members to the NPDI, they also have been working on different approaches on how to make progress on nuclear disarmament in particular, because of the stalemate
on the negotiations, in particular between Russia and the US. But also there is no dialogue between the US and China on strategic nuclear risk reductions and reducing nuclear arsenals. So I think the Prime Minister and Japan are trying to bring to the table a fresh look into this problematic. And I believe that we have to look, and the State Party will have just to measure, the merits of that plant, that it can be pursued anyway, together with the Stockholm Initiative, MPDI, and many others, and see whether from that menu à la carte, state parties can pick and choose and pick some concrete actions to be implemented in the next few years. And I believe that that is something that, if this review conference managed to get it with or without a document, but at least to have a clear idea of some concrete actions to move forward the nuclear disarmament agenda were to be agreed one way or another, I think in itself will be a very important success, taking into account the current circumstances, the current international security environment, which is not very proclive, very open to that. But I think just we have a chance. The same way that the war in Ukraine is casting a shadow and is increasing the challenges to the review conference, I believe also it gives opportunities. I think that state parties are really aware of the danger of nuclear weapons, and I think that may push the party to say, okay, we have to shake the tree, we have to do something different, because I believe that the credibility and the debatability of the treaty may be at stake. And I think that is, in my introductory remarks this morning, I called for a historical responsibility of state parties to look into their obligations under the treaty and see how we can improve those obligations. I think we are at a critical juncture in the history of the treaty. We have faced other challenges in the past, in these 52 years, and we managed to handle them. But I believe that we are at a critical juncture in the history of the treaty, and I think just state parties should look into these issues, very seriously.
Are there any other questions?
One more. At the last NPT conference, what stood out again were the non-nuclear states telling the two, the five, the nine, that they weren't moving fast enough. They were hoarding it, and then it was very hard to get a conclusion because of that. Are you anticipating anything like that again, or there are other issues, and times have changed? I'm not trying to make an analogy, I'm just curious.
No, thank you. It is true. But I believe that the frustration by the great majority of state parties to the NPT is growing. It's growing fast. And I would say it's even more than in 2015. And I believe that is my message to the nuclear weapon states, call it P5 or P3 plus P1, as I call it now them. They have to realize about that situation has changed dramatically. And they're expecting that looking up to the nuclear weapon states to do something better, concrete actions. And I believe that could be, if we were to agree on a process, to start a process of negotiations and dialogues on nuclear risk reduction. Granted, nuclear risk reduction is not nuclear disarmament itself, it's not a substitute for nuclear disarmament, but maybe it's a conduit, maybe it's a way to move forward that agenda. And I believe that we can master an agreement on how we can do that. But I fully agree with you that the frustration is growing, and I think that the nuclear weapon states, should be concerned about that, in the sense that at the end of the day, the NPT is a grand bargain, in the sense that those without nuclear weapons have agreed to receive safeguards inspection from the IAEA to prove that the nuclear programs, those having nuclear programs, will be used only for peaceful purposes. And in exchange of that, they got the commitments, the obligations by the then 5 nuclear weapon states to one day start the process for real, irreversible, verifiable nuclear disarmament. So what? The great majority of state parties see that they are complying with their own obligations, but not the 5 nuclear weapon states. So they start to wonder, whether that grand bargain, it is a bargain or not, and what they're going to do with that. So I'm not saying that we are at the point of breaking down the regime, but I'm saying that the discussion has already started. And I believe that nuclear weapon states have to take these challenges very seriously. And also, it's not like, nuclear weapon states and NAM, because you have many from the WEOC, like Ireland, Austria, New Zealand, others, also pointing to the nuclear weapon states, saying that, and we heard this morning, just the Minister for Disarmament Affairs of New Zealand pointed to that, the frustration, about the lack of progress on nuclear disarmament by the nuclear weapon states. So it's not only that the traditional, WEOC against NAM, but it's broader than that.
I'll look around the room one more time, maybe give a meaningful pause to see if there's any other questions. I don't see any questions in the room, and I don't see any questions online. So I think it's safe to presume that that is the end of this press briefing, which leads me to express my sincere thanks to Ambassador Slauvinen, President of the 10th NPT Review Conference, and to you all for being here today. Thanks very much, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you much.